When I look back at my marriage, I realize that some of the most life-changing moments didn't come from the big milestones like weddings, anniversaries, or vacations. They came in the quiet hours, in the simple words spoken from the heart. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 12 years when he finally shared a wish with me that he had been holding on to for much longer than I realized. It wasn't something extravagant. It wasn't something that required money or material things. It was something much deeper. And when I said yes, I didn't know how much it would transform the way I saw him, myself, and our life together. Daniel and I had always had what people described as a steady marriage. We weren't the type to post every moment of our lives online, or to act like we had a perfect storybook romance. Instead, we lived quietly, enjoying our little world. We had a house with a porch that overlooked a patch of woods, a modest life filled with routines that were both comforting and sometimes dull. He was an engineer, steady, reliable, someone who liked predictability. I was more of a dreamer, the type to get lost in books, to take long walks by myself, to look for meaning in ordinary things. Somehow, those two sides balanced out. But even in the best of marriages, there are silences, things that remain unspoken, not because of fear, but because of timing. And it wasn't until one quiet evening, sitting on our couch after dinner, that Daniel finally let me see into one of those silences. I could tell something was on his mind before he said a word. He kept glancing at me, fidgeting with his hands, looking like he wanted to speak, but wasn't sure where to begin. After years together, I knew this look well. "Just say it," I told him softly, setting down the book I had been reading. "Whatever it is, I can handle it." He smiled nervously. "It's nothing bad. Just something I've wanted to tell you for a while. Something I've been hoping for." I waited. Daniel was not a man of dramatic confessions. When he spoke from the heart, it always carried weight. Finally, he said, "I've always wanted us to do something meaningful together. Not just vacations or family gatherings, but something that feels like it leaves a mark. Something that reminds us why we chose each other." I tilted my head, curious. "Like what?" He shrugged, his eyes dropping for a moment before he looked back at me. "I've always wanted us to start something together. Maybe a small project, maybe something that helps people. Just something that's ours." It wasn't the kind of wish I had been expecting. But as the words sank in, I felt my heart warm. Here was my husband, the practical man who usually cared about schedules and order, speaking like a dreamer. And I realized in that moment just how much I loved him for daring to share that. I reached out, took his hand, and said, "Then let's do it." I didn't know what it would be yet. But I knew that when your partner shares something that deeply matters to them, the only answer you can give is yes. The days after that conversation felt different. It was as if Daniel and I had opened a new door together, and behind it was a world of possibilities. We began brainstorming at the kitchen table, writing ideas on scraps of paper. Should we start a community garden? Volunteer at the local shelter together? Create a small business that reflected our passions? Every idea felt like a puzzle piece, and though we didn't know what the full picture was yet, we kept collecting them. There were nights we stayed up late, laughing, disagreeing, imagining, and dreaming. It reminded me of the early days of our marriage, when we used to talk about our future like it was a canvas waiting to be painted. Over time, life had pulled us into routine, into work deadlines and grocery lists, into the small but consuming details of everyday living. But now, suddenly, we were painting again. One weekend, we visited the farmer's market in town. As we wandered through stalls of fresh produce, homemade crafts, and baked goods, Daniel stopped at a table where a woman was selling handmade journals. He picked one up, ran his hand across the cover, and looked at me with that spark in his eyes. "What if we created something like this? Not journals exactly, but something people can use every day, something that carries meaning." I loved the idea instantly. I had always loved writing, reflecting, and capturing stories. He loved designing and building things. Together, we could create something real. And so, slowly, the wish began to take shape. We started working on a small project, designing journals with thoughtful prompts, meant to help people reflect on their lives and relationships. It was small, humble, but it was ours. We spent weekends sketching designs, choosing paper, reaching out to local printers. It felt like falling in love all over again, not with each other because that love had never left, but with the act of creating together. There were challenges, of course. We argued about fonts, about colors, about whether people would even care. There were moments when we wondered if we were wasting our time. But through it all, we leaned on each other. Every time doubt crept in, Daniel would remind me of why we started. Because it was my wish, and you said yes. Months later, when we finally held the first printed journal in our hands, I felt tears sting my eyes. It wasn't about the journal itself. It was about the journey. It was about saying yes to something that mattered to him and discovering that it mattered to me too. Looking back now, I realized that the wish wasn't really about a project. It was about connection. It was about remembering that marriage isn't just about living side by side. It's about continuing to build something together, even after years have passed. Sometimes I think about how easy it would have been to dismiss his wish. To say we were too busy, too tired, too practical. But saying yes opened a door that made our marriage stronger than it had ever been. And so, when I tell people our story, I don't talk about the journal itself. I talk about the moment he asked, the courage it took him to share, and the love that made me say yes. Because in the end, that was the real gift. Not the project we created, but the life we continued to create together, one yes at a time.